Jaya. Hare Krishna, bro. Jaya, thank you for doing Jaya Radhamadava program. That saves me much time. So thank you. Thank you for that. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for, I'm always grateful. I don't have to speak to the wall always. So thank you everyone for coming. So today we'll be reading from the 10th Canto, chapter 43, verse 17, I believe. 17. Ooh, somebody might have to read this for me. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, as mentioned before, we're reading from the 10th Canto, chapter 43, verse 17. We'll be reading the Sanskrit transliteration. Translation purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Unfortunately, I didn't practice this verse before I came. I didn't realize how long it was, so I'll do my best. Malanam Ashnir Turnam Naravara Strinam Smara Murtiman. Maybe I'll just do word for word. It's a very long verse, and it's a very long purport. And I think I may maybe just read the translation, to be honest. Yeah, I'll just read the Sanskrit, and then I'll continue to the translation, since we have a lot to cover today. So, and plus I need to get my glasses corrected, so I can't see this verse that well. So, yeah, will somebody like to chant it for me? Can you get the mic? So that'll be better. That would be preferred. So that gives me time to cover my notes. So, see, in devotional service, we can't do it all on our own. We need a lot of help, all the help we could get. So. Yeah, the phone, because the light is a little bit better. Thank you. Okay.
Vallanam Sanirnuno Naravarastinasmaro Murtimana Gopana Swajano Asatakshiti Bhuja Sasta Swapitro Shishu Mrityu Bhorjapate Virahvir Dusya Tattva Param Yogina Vrishtina Paradevati Vidito Rangata Ikati Gata Shagraja
Malanam Ashanirnirnam Nam Ashanirnirnam Naravaraastrinam Smaro Murtinam Varastrinam Smaro Gopanam Swajano Satam Shiti Bhujam Nam Swajano Shasta Swapitra Sishu Mrityur Bhojapatir Virad Vidusham Bhojapatir Tattvam Param Yoginam Vrishninam Param Devateti vidito rangam gata sagrajam.
Malanam ashanirindinam Naravarastrinam smaro murtiman Gopaman svajano satam Kshitibhujam Shastasvapitro sisuhu Mrityurvo japaterviradavidusham Tattvam param yoginam Vrishinam parada devateti vidito Rangam gata sagrajaha
Srinam smaro murtinam Gopinam swajano satatam shiti Pujam shasta swapitro shishu Metyur boja pate virad avidusham Tatvam param yoginam Rishinam paradevateti vidito Rangam gata sagrajaha
Mulanam for the wrestlers. Ashanihi. Malanam. Malanam for the wrestlers. Ashnihi. Lightning. Nrinam for the males. Nadavaraha, the best of men. Strinam for the women. Smaraha, Cupid. Murtiman, incarnate. Gopanam for the cowherds. Swajanaha, their relative. What is that? Asatam, impious. Shiti Bhajan for the kings. Sashta, a punisher. Swapatraha for his parents. Shishu, a child. Mrityuhu, death. Boja Patehe for the king of the Bojas. Kamsa. Virat, the totality of the material universe. Avidushjam, what is that? For the unintelligent. Tatwam, the truth. Param, supreme. Yoginam, for the yogis. Nrininam, for the members of the Vrishni dynasty. Paradevata, their most worshipful deity. Iti, in these ways. Vidataha, understood. Rangram, the arena. Gatsaha, he entered. What is that? Sa, along with Ragajaha, Agajaha, his elder brother. I hope that's the hardest part of the class. Translation and purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jaya. Translation. The various groups of people in the arena regarded Krishna in different ways when he entered it with his elder brother. The wrestlers saw Krishna as a lightning bolt, the men of Mathura as the best of males, the women as Cupid in person, the cowherd men as their relative, the impious rulers as a chastiser, his parents as, this prince is actually cut off here, as their child, what does that say? The king of the Bhojas as death, the unintelligent as the Supreme Lord's universal form, the yogis as the absolute truth, and the Vrishnis as their supreme worshipable deity. Purport, very long purport. Who would like to read the purport today? Matsuji, you have the mic. Would you like to read it? So, to help me out. Jai, thank you.
Srila Sridhar Swami quotes the following verse, which explains the 10 attitudes towards Krishna described here. Rudro dutascha sringaro hasyam virodaya tata bhajanakascha bibatsaha shantaha saprema bhaktikaha. There are 10 different moods. Fury, perceived by the wrestlers, wonder by the men, conjugal attraction, the woman, laughter, the cowherds, chivalry, the kings, mercy, his parents, terror, Kamsa, ghastliness, the unintelligent, peaceful neutrality, the yogis, and loving devotion, the Vrishnis. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti points out that people like the wrestlers, Kamsa, and the impious rulers perceive Krishna as dangerous, angry, or threatening because they fail to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. Actually, Lord Krishna is everyone's friend and well-wisher, but because we rebel against him, he chastises us, and thus we may perceive him as threatening. Krishna, or God, is actually merciful, and when he punishes us, that is also his mercy. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur quotes the following Vedic statement. Raso vai saha rasam. He evayam labvanandi bhavati. He himself is rasa, the taste or mallow of a particular relationship. And certainly one who achieves this rasa becomes a nun filled with bliss. That's from the Taittiriya Upanishad 271. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati quotes a further verse to explain the word rasa. Vyatitya Bhavana Vartma Yash Chamatkara Para Buhu Hirdi Satvoj Vale Badham Svadate Saraso Mataha. That which is beyond imagination, heavy with wonder, and relished in the heart, shining with goodness, such is known as rasa. As Srila Rupa Goswami elaborately explains in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there are 5 main rasas: neutrality, servitude, friendship, parental love, and conjugal love, and 7 secondary rasas: amazement, humor, chivalry, compassion, fury, fear, and dread. Thus altogether there are 12 rasas, and the supreme object of them all is Sri Krishna himself. In other words, our love and affection are actually meant for Sri Krishna. Unfortunately, out of ignorance, we stubbornly try to squeeze happiness and love out of material relationships, which are not directly connected to Krishna, and thus life becomes a constant frustration. The solution is simple: surrender to Krishna, love Krishna's devotees, and be happy forever.
Thank you, Masaji. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I might need a lot of help in this class, so prepare to get your Veda base ready. So thank you. Amagyan Samanandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Shakshumilitam Yena Tasma Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitanyena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vanshakapaturubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhattavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai, once again, thank you everyone for coming. I prefer to speak to people and not to the wall, so I'm always grateful for that. As usual, there's so many people to contribute to the development of Krishna consciousness, but first and foremost, I always like to offer my gratitude to my brother, my mother and my brother, His Grace Jai Jagannath Prabhu. As usual, I would like to share a quote, starting off the class with a quote that kind of sets the tone of this, what we're going to be discussing today. So this quote is actually, it's a very nice quote, because this verse describes how we see things, how we see people, persons, places, things, and circumstances. So there's a nice quote by John Lubbock, and he said, quote, "What we see depends mainly on what we look for. In the same field, the farmer will notice the crop, the geologist, the fossils, botanist, the flowers, artist, the coloring, sportsman, the cover for the game. Though we may all look at the same thing, it does not mean we all see the same thing." End quote. So I'll share that one more time. I like to repeat things over again because Prabhupada says in his purport to the Gita 225, things have to be repeated in order to understand the matter thoroughly without error. So I'll share this one more time. Quote, "What we see depends mainly on what we look for. In the same field, the farmer will notice the crop, the geologist, the fossils, botanist, the flowers, artist, the coloring, sportsman, the cover for the game. Though we may all look at the same thing, it does not mean we all see the same thing." End quote. So, in this regard, this verse for today is vividly describing what we all go through every day. And what's that? It's that we may see the same person, place, thing, and circumstance, but we'll interpret it differently according to our motivation. So, in other words, this verse describes two kinds of people, the protagonist and the antagonist. What does the protagonist mean? Protagonist means the good guys, and antagonist means the bad guys. So it's described in this verse that the protagonist considered Krishna a good person. Why? Because they were seen with the eyes of appreciation. On the other hand, it also describes that the antagonist considered Krishna a bad person. Why? They were blinded by envy. And so, this reminds me of a nice quote by an American author. She was actually born blind and deaf. Her name is Helen Keller. So she said, "The only thing worse than being blind is having sight but no vision." So there's also a similar quote. It says, "The eyes are useless when the mind is blind." So what does Prahlad Maharaj say in this regard? He says, "Nate vidu swartagatim hi Vishnu durashaya ye bahir artha maninaha andaya tandir upaniyamanas te apisha tantram urudamni badaha." So this is from the 7th canto, 5th chapter, verse 31. It's a famous verse where Prahlad Maharaj, he says, what causes us to become blind and what causes swartagatam, what do we consider the ultimate goal of life that causes us to be blind? Sense gratification. So pick your sense gratification. It could be anything, movies, Netflix, social media, so much wasting time. So this causes us to be spiritually blind. Naturally, of course, we can't judge because we've all conditioned souls. That's why we're so kind of messed up. But nevertheless, even in spiritual life, even if you're practicing devotional service your entire life, still you could do sense gratification. And what type of sense gratification? You want to be the center of the universe. There's a saying, when they discover the center of the universe, a lot of people will be disappointed to discover they are not it. And so Martin Luther King Jr., he also says something similar in his speech, Drum Major Instinct. It's a speech I normally always quote from. He says, nobody is unhappy about praise, even when they know they don't deserve it, and even when they don't believe it. The only people who are unhappy about praise is when that praise is going too much towards somebody else. And so this is what causes us to be blind. So the exact verse, the exact translation, what Prahlad Maharaj says, the verse is kind of long, but I'll say one section in regards to what Prahlad Maharaj says. Quote, so this is from the 7th Canto, 5th chapter, verse 31. Prahlad Maharaj says, quote, as blind men, guided by another blind man, miss the right path and fall into a ditch. Materially attached men, led by another materially attached man, are bound by the ropes of fruit to labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. And so what are the threefold miseries? Adhyatmika, Adhibodhika, and Adhidaivika. Adhyatmika means what? Misery suffered from our body and mind? Yeah, body and mind. Adhibodhika means from other living entities, correct? And Adhidaivika means miseries caused by the demigods, nature, too cold, too hot, etc. So Adhyatmika, miseries caused by the body and mind. And so how can we see this in so many pastimes, including this one? Meaning that even though we have our health, we have our loving family and friends, still, we could be so grateful for so many things. Still, our peace of mind is stolen by the threefold misery. And what is that? It's very simple that when we're honored, we have peace of mind. When somebody else is honored, we don't have peace of mind. Same when people dishonor us. So we could have so many opulence, including in devotional life, so many things to be grateful for. But as soon as somebody criticizes us, as soon as somebody receives more honor than us, then the threefold miseries attack you. And what is that? That's called envy. And so even Jesus, Lord Jesus Christ, there's actually, this could be another class, but basically there's so many verses where Lord Jesus Christ says the exact same thing as the Srimad Bhagavatam. So a lot of people say, including the Bhavishya Purana, says that Jesus went to India. So many people said Jesus went to India. So this verse by Prahlad Maharaj, I'll share one more time, and I'll share exactly what Lord Jesus Christ says in this regard. So Prahlad Maharaj says, 7th Canto, 5th chapter, verse 31, quote, as blind men guided by another blind man miss the right path and fall into a ditch, materially attached men led by another materially attached man are bound by the ropes of fruit to labor, which are made of very strong cords, and they continue again and again in materialistic life, suffering the threefold miseries. So in the Holy Bible, Luke chapter 6, verse 39, Lord Jesus Christ says, quote, can a blind man lead another blind man? Will they not both fall into a ditch? So there's so many verses like that. And so there's also so many pastimes in this regard to how we see persons, places, things, and circumstances, especially other people. So in the pastime of Haridasa Kaur, the prostitute, she saw Haridasa Kaur as a good person. Why? Appreciation. Ramachandra Khan, he saw Haridasa Kaur as a bad person. Why? Envy. Same with the pastime regarding Lord Shiva. Sati saw Shiva as a good person. Why? Appreciation. Daksha, he saw Shiva as a bad person. Why? Envy. So the citizens in Ambarish's kingdom saw him as a good person. Durvasa Muni saw him as a bad person. Why? Envy. And the citizens of, there's so many examples, but I'll share one last example. So the citizens of Hastinapur saw the Pandavas as good people. Why? Appreciation. And Dhritarashtra and the Kauravas saw the Pandavas as bad people. Why? Envy. So, basically, there's two nice quotes by Prabhupada where he basically says that even if we're physically blind, but if we can spiritually see, it will lead to our elevation. On the other hand, even if we could physically see, but if we're spiritually blind, it will lead to our degradation. Unfortunately for Dhritarashtra, he was born both physically blind and spiritually blind. So he had a double whammy, a double whammy. And so, Prabhu, do you have your Veda base? Database, can you look up what Prabhupada says in Gita, chapter 1, verse 2? So, while you're looking that up, I'll say, because this is regarding Dhritarashtra, while you're looking that up, I'll say, I'll mention, while I have the book here, which Srila Prabhupada says in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, verse 1, Canto 3, chapter 1, verse 6. So, 316. So, Prabhupada says, purport, in the purport, quote, Dhritarashtra was blind from birth, but his blindness in committing impious activities to support his dishonest sons was a greater blindness than his physical lack of eyesight. The physical lack of sight does not bar one from spiritual progress, but when one is blind spiritually, even though physically fit, that blindness is dangerously detrimental to the progressive path of human life. So you have the purport. Does anybody have the mic? So Prabhupada says a similar thing, but the more references, the better.
Dhritarashtra was blind from birth. Unfortunately, he was also bereft of spiritual vision. He knew very well that his sons were equally blind in the matter of religion, and he was sure that they could never reach an understanding with the Pandavas, who were all pious since birth.
Is that?
There's more.
There's more?
Yeah.
But is that just a part for the blindness?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. We can end there. So same thing. So Prabhupada mentions the same thing in another way. And so this is the principle, as I was mentioning before. Even if we can't physically see, but if we could spiritually see, then it will lead to our elevation. On the other hand, even if we could physically see, but if we're spiritually blind, it will lead to our degradation. So this is a universal principle. Now, we could compare our life to Krishna Das Kaviraj's life. Now, just look in our own life. We have our sight. God willing, we may not have any disease. We have so many loving friends and family. We may have our wealth, we may have our health, we may have our youth. And we have on top of all of that, as devotees, we have the entire temple to be grateful for, deities. There's so many services that, over the past years, I would minimize people's services, like how difficult it was, but Krishna gave me the opportunity to, sometimes briefly do other devotee services. And so it's no doubt that the deity worship takes a lot. There's no doubt about that. And they're looking so beautiful every day. And I think the devotees wear knee pads to dress them for like a few hours, I believe, if I'm correct. So there's always reasons to be grateful for. But there's many services that, I minimize, like flowers. I'm like, oh, you just pluck the flowers? No, it's not pluck the flowers. It takes a long process. I had the opportunity, but one service that I was very surprised at how much it took is that burfi making. So many years ago, over 10 years ago, there was this devotee named Jagannath Prabhu, not my brother Jaya Jagannath, but another Indian devotee named Jagannath. So whatever reason, I was in the kitchen. He asked me to stir the burfi. So I was like, yeah, sure, Prabhu. And so then he went over to make the rest of Raj Bhog or whatever he was doing in the kitchen. And so, he didn't come back for a little bit. I think he left the kitchen. So I was thinking, how long am I supposed to stir this? And then he comes back in the kitchen. I'm like, Prabhu, how long does it take to make this burfis? I believe he said 4 hours. So I'm like, Prabhu, I can't stand here for 4 hours. And so all the devotees back then, they would know that since we're conditioned Westerners, my brother and I and all maybe the Western devotees here, is that our patience is, very low compared to maybe devotees who grew up in India. And so when my brother would make the burfi, guess how long it took him? 30 minutes. He would turn the flame all the way up and stir it as fast as he could, and boom. So it never came out smoothly, it came out in chunks. And so basically, but still, a lot of devotees preferred his chunky burfi over the smooth. And so the whole point is that in our devotional life, we may have our health, our wealth, our youth, but on top of all these things to be grateful for, not only that we're devotees, so we have the deities, we have prasadam, we have Prabhupada's books, so many things to be grateful for. Yet, have you heard this? Have you heard this before? I've heard it myself before. I speak for myself. I can't criticize because I've done it over the years, and we've all done it over the years. And what do we normally hear? The government is holding me back. The GBC is holding me back. My temple president is holding me back. The devotees in my community are holding me back. Everyone and everything is holding me back from building spiritual success. I've said it before, so I can't criticize, so I'm speaking about myself. But yeah, as sadhakas means practice, naturally, we still have to purify ourselves of these anarthas. But still, look at Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami. He's the author of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Now, what does he say of himself? In the Ansha Leela, chapter 20, verse 93, it describes that Krishna Das, he describes what his situation he had to deal with. He says, I'm paraphrasing, I'm blind, I'm deaf, I'm old, and I have 5 kinds of diseases. Yet, he miraculously wrote the entire Chaitanya Charitamrita. So what does this mean? This means that although we're fully able, most of the time we complain about everyone and everything that's holding us back from being a spiritual success. But look at Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. He was fully disabled, but he never complained that anyone or anything was holding him back from being a spiritual success. So there's a nice quote. It says, without God, you can do nothing. With God, there's nothing you can't do. Kali Kaleta Dharma, Krishna Nama Sankirtan, Krishna Shakti Vina Nahitara Pravartana. When we're giving Krishna Shakti Vina, and who's giving Krishna Shakti Vina, the empowerment of Krishna, is very simple. Everyone. Jaya tamam prabhante te tam te type of bajami aham. All you have to do is plug into Krishna consciousness, and you get the empowerment. So what does that mean? That means you have to read the books, you have to perform your sadhana. The empowerment is available for everyone. Just like the outlet is available for everyone. All you have to do is plug into it. It's very simple. So everyone can get the Shakti. So therefore, in Gita chapter 10, verse 8, Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate iti mato bhajate mam buddha bhava samavitaha. He says, I am the power source of everything, and those who are truly wise connect to me. Buddha bhava samavitaha, those who are enlightened and wise. And why? It's very simple. Why is a computer attractive? It's connected to its power source. If it's disconnected from its power source, it's unattractive. So when we connect to Krishna, we can do even... This is what Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, chapter 14, verse 1. He says, if we connect to Krishna... Oh, probably you're checking it out, huh? Yes. Adi Leela, chapter 14, verse 1. So he says, if we connect to Krishna, if a person is connected to Krishna, then even difficult things become easy to perform. But if we're disconnected from Krishna, then even easy things become very difficult to perform. So although we have our health, our wealth, our youth, our loving family friends, Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavad Shraddha, Madhurava, Srimutishra, we have so many things to be grateful for. Yet, we complain that everything is holding me back. Krishnadas Kaviraj, miraculously, he never complained that anyone or anything. Why? Because he was connected to Krishna. And why do we do so many complaining? That means we're disconnected from Krishna. Have you ever seen anyone who's disconnected from the Wi-Fi look happy? I've never seen that. Nobody's ever happy when they're disconnected from the Wi-Fi. In much the same way, when we're disconnected from Krishna, that's the test. That's how you know whether you're connected to Krishna or not. If you're on, not to say that we're always blissed out and transcendental, but still, when things don't go your way, you realize, oh yes, this one thing didn't go my way, but still I have a million things to be grateful for. So I'm not going to let this one thing take my peace of mind. Just like Hiranyakashipu, it's described that he had 99.9% of the universe glorifying. Only one person didn't respect his opinion, Prahlad, and that was enough to take away 100% of his happiness. Why? He was disconnected from Krishna. And so same thing in the Gita, chapter 2, verse 66, it says the same thing. It says, from one who is not connected to the Supreme in Krishna consciousness can have neither transcendental intelligence, a steady mind, And how can there be, or peace? And how can there be any happiness without peace? So the same thing is mentioned, you know, we gain some peace of mind, some satisfaction when we're connected to Krishna. And what's the criteria? You're happy when you're connected to Krishna, just as you're happy when you're connected to your Wi-Fi. And same thing. When you're disconnected from Krishna, you're unhappy, just as when you're disconnected from your Wi-Fi. So it's not rocket science. So that's why the Bhagavatam says, when we're connected to Krishna, what is that? Yasyasi bhaktir bhagavati kanchana sarva gunais tatra samasate suraha. When we're connected to Krishna, that means we're supposed to develop all the good qualities. Now, good compliments make us connected to Krishna, but good qualities keep us connected to Krishna. It's very simple. When you come to devotion life, so many devotees may compliment you, right? But how long will that last? Not very long. So what do you need? You need more than good compliments. You need good qualities. It's very simple. Humility, tolerance, forgiveness. If you think about, these qualities are only meant to be used when things don't go our way, when we don't always receive good compliments. That's the purpose of good qualities. Very simple. A rich teenager will never tell his father, "My dear father, I forgive you for buying me Mercedes-Benz for my birthday, and I'll tolerate my $50 million inheritance once I graduate from high school." Somebody has to do the tolerance. No, we tolerate and forgive people who don't give us love, respect. Why? So we can remain connected to Krishna. Because suppose nobody ever honored us, respected us, what does that mean? We'll always be disconnected from Krishna. So it's not rocket science. All you have to do is read the books and connect to Krishna. Just like Kali Kaleta Dharma Krishna Nama Sankirtan Krishna Shakti. Krishna says, my mercy is available to everyone, but all you have to do is connect to me, just as you have to connect to the outlet. So it's not any rocket science. So anyways, this is a very universal principle that that when we're spiritually diseased, then we can't perceive the greatness within anyone. But if we're spiritually healthy, we can perceive the greatness within everyone. So this is a universal principle. So there's a nice quote by Lord Buddha. He says, just like in his pastime, it's described that the protagonist saw Krishna as a good person. Why? They had they saw through the eyes of appreciation. And so the antagonists, they couldn't appreciate Krishna. Why? Because they were blinded by envy. So Buddha says a nice quote in the Sugata. He says, "If a fool be associated with a wise man, even for all his life, he'll perceive the truth as little as a spoon perceives the taste of soup. If an intelligent man be associated with a wise man, even for 1 minute only, he'll perceive the truth as much as the tongue perceives the taste of soup." So what's the difference between a spoon and a tongue? I was mentioning this, previous class. The difference between a spoon and a tongue is that a spoon is dead and a tongue is alive. So if we're spiritually dead with pride, envy, and vengeance, then we cannot perceive the greatness in anyone but ourselves. And if we're spiritually alive, like the tongue, then we can perceive the greatness within everyone but ourselves. Primeta swabhavyaham primeta sambandha semane Krishna monanahi primaganda. So this is a verse from the last chapter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's 20 chapters in Anshalila chapter 20. I don't remember what verse, but it says, "For one who has love of God." Now this is a dilemma. This verse is kind of a dilemma for us, but it says, one who has love of God. What does he say? He says, "I'm not a devotee." Not only that, nahi prima ganda. I have not one drop of love for Krishna. Everyone has love for Krishna but me. Now this is a dilemma for us, because most devotees, they will joke about this verse. They'll say, well, then there's those who actually say, "I have no love for Krishna," but they do. And for us, we could probably say, I'll speak for myself, but I'm sure all of us will agree, all the devotees will joke that, well, I actually have no love for Krishna, because we're filled with so many anarthas, there's so many temptations. I mean, you want to, just like I was explaining to one devotee, you go on YouTube, and YouTube, this social media, it's a nice alternative, but it's not the ultimate, you could say, medium to gain spiritual knowledge, because it's Kali Yuga. You go on YouTube expecting to watch a spiritual lecture, and what happens? The reality is, I was joking, you'll see so many advertisements, So many temptations to, oh, you're like, oh, wow. You know, you watch the lecture for what, 5 minutes, and then your mind is swayed away for what, the next 50 minutes. Oh yeah, let me get back to my lecture. So YouTube is not, all this social media is not a good medium. You know, personal one-on-one contact is better. And so, so basically, there's a nice verse by Rupa Goswami that explains the same point, that when we're spiritually diseased, we cannot perceive any greatness. Like we're spiritually blind, or we cannot taste, you could say, the pastimes of Krishna or the holy name. So you probably know where I'm going with this verse, right? Where we, in Rupa Goswami, we cannot. Yeah, yes, exactly. I figure you know it. So we'll read that verse. So this is from the Nectar of Instruction, text 7, as Prabhu mentioned. And so it says, quote, translation, the holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna, it doesn't say this, but you can also include the devotees of the Lord also. The holy name, character, pastimes, devotees, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. So how do we get rid of this jaundice of ignorance when we cannot taste the glories of the holy names or anything related to Krishna? Well, this verse says, and Prabhupada elaborates on the purport, is that very simple. You keep chanting. But is it that easy to chant if you're committing offenses? Bahu jama kade yadi shravanam kirtan tabutana paya Krishna pade primagdan. Yes, the solution is to keep chanting, but the reality is how can we keep chanting if we're, you could say, distracted? Krishna means the all-attractive one, and Maya means the all-distractive one. So I was mentioning, when you go on YouTube, there's so many distractions. Social media, we have our TV, we have some, now there's some distractions that are inside our control and some distractions that are outside our control. So, you know, there's television, there's movies, you know, we don't have to go to the movies, YouTube, you know, we have to use our computer, etc. And you have to go to work. You have to associate with your family, some of your family members who may not be Krishna conscious. So some of the distractions, that means you have to get serious about your Krishna consciousness, because some distractions you cannot avoid. That's a fact. And so Krishna means the all-attractive one, and Maya means the all-distracted one. And now we could be humble for ourselves. Now, why are we always disturbed by so many things? How come we're not given the tolerance like Jesus Christ, like Haridasa Kaur, like Prahlad Maharaj? Just like I was mentioning in a verse from Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami in the Adi Leela, chapter 14, verse 1 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, if one is connected to Krishna, then even difficult things become easy to perform. But if one is disconnected from Krishna, then even easy things become difficult to perform. So Jesus was crucified, and he could still forgive. We're only crucified by words, and we cannot forgive. So why is this? Same with Haridasa Kaur, same with Prahlad Maharaj, same with Ambarish Maharaj, same with all these great saints. They were put in the most hellish conditions, but they were undisturbed. Narayana Pada Sarvi Nakutashana Bibhyati Swarga Apavarganata Keshu Apituliata Darshinaha. So this is a famous verse by Lord Shiva when he was glorifying the resilience of Chittaketu. He says, for one who is connected to Narayana Pada Sarve, then what? Then hellish conditions or heavenly conditions, he doesn't notice any of them. Why? Because he's not Narayana Pada Sarve. He's connected to Krishna. Just like the Brahma Samhita says, Primanjana Charita Bhakti Viloshanena Santa Sadaiva Hridayeshu Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sadana Machinta Guna Sarupam Govinda Mari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. When one's eyes are anointed with prema, you do not notice anything but Krishna. As Krishna says in chapter 6, verse 30 of the Gita, he says, for one who is connected to me, then they see me everywhere. And it's very simple. You know, even though this is a mundane example, but it's a very vivid example to describe that what we're about to describe here. That in the material world, when a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband and wife when they're so-called in love, what happens? They do not notice anything but each other, even when they're separated. You know, there could be like a bank robbery over there. Hey, can you call 911? 911, it reminds me of my lover. You don't notice any, it could be Armageddon, the world is, and they don't notice anything. In much the same way, how are all these great saints, how are they undisturbed by all these hellish conditions? Because they're Narayana Padasare, Nakutashna Bibiti, Swarga Apavarga Nadakeshu Apitulita Darshinaha. They're always connected to Narayana or Krishna in Prema, and therefore they do not notice all the, hellish situations that coming upon them. But that does not mean they ignore the hellish situations that come upon others. So they're very compassionate. Padaduka Duki, they're not so oblivious in love of God that they ignore others. And so therefore, what's that verse? Archayam eva hadaye pujam yashada yehate nata bateshu chanyesu sabata prakrita shmitaha. This verse says, it's 11th canto, I think it's the Nava Yogendras, and it describes what our spiritual vision should be. It says the neophyte devotee who is always absorbed in Archayam, the deity, or you could say God in general, but they ignore others. They ignore or disrespect the devotees or people in general. That person is considered the lowest kind of devotee. So devotees are not so-called in love of God with their guru, because the guru is considered taking a position of God, although he's not God. But, that's a tendency. We may be so, you could say, so involved in guru worship, so involved in deity worship, and we may call this prema, but no, the Bhagavatam said this is actually the lowest kind of devotee, when you're so into guru worship, deity worship, that you neglect, or even worse, you disrespect the devotees and people in general. And so this is a lesson we can take. And so this actually reminds me of a devotee in our community who mostly grew up in Naperville. So this is actually an interesting story. See, I'm going off the script. Hopefully I'll get to a few more points, but fortunately or unfortunately, it was a long verse today. But anyway, I'll just continue and end at this particular time. So long story short, there's a devotee in our community. All the devotees in our community may know, especially from Naperville. She actually lives in Chicago right now. And her name is, most people call her Rasa, but her name is Rasa Bihari. And her husband is Mohit Prabhu. And he's like the Incredible Hawk. I've never seen an Indian devotee who looked like the Incredible Hawk before. So he does. So I'll definitely want him on my side. So if if a battle of Kudu Sesha goes down, that's for sure. So anyways, she's a very nice devotee who was in the Naperville community for many years. I saw her and I saw her son. Now she's white body devotee. And she has a son who's actually, he's dark skinned, darker than me. He's African American. And so growing up, I'll probably speculate, I'm sure, oh, that's her son. Oh, he must be adopted. But of course, then I found out later from other devotees, he's not adopted. That's actually her biological son. So, in her former marriage, her husband's obviously African American. His genes took over. So this is a way you could jump to conclusion. But that's my whole point. But basically, because I'm always asking about her son. Her son is named Tama. I'm always asking how is Tama doing. But what I didn't know, maybe a couple months ago, it's very funny that I was at a Sunday feast. And I was walking by her, most of our relationships are like, Hare Krishna, Hare Bo, I know you for like over 10 years, and that's our relationship, Hare Bo, Hare Krishna, and you don't even know their name. And but since my devotee was a kind of significant person in this community, devotees are always asking me, how's my brother doing? And where is he? And so they did the same. So when I walked past Rasa Bihari and Mohit Prabhu, they asked me about me, how have I been doing, how's my brother doing? And so I sat there and talked to them for actually maybe an hour. And so she told me that her father is actually a Prabhupada disciple. And I was very surprised. I'm like, really? All these years I didn't know. And so she told me that she grew up and she speaks fluent French and she grew up in France. I'm like, you grew up in France. So this is what I asked her. This is, it's not exactly the same, but this is precisely what happened. So I asked her, so when she started telling me her story and about her father, I asked her, is your father Hari Vilas Prabhu? And she says, yes. I'm like, was your father the temple president of, oh yeah, this is what she said. My father was the temple president of France, something like that. But I said, is your father Hari Vilas Prabhu? She says, yes. How do you know? I said, because I've been quoting your father for many years. So I've been quoting our father for many years, and I didn't know that, his daughter was in our community. And so this is why I quote from him. It's actually a quote where he's mentioning one mistake. So this is in Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita, so it's kind of ingrained in stone for life. And it's a nice story, but he was humbly explaining one of his mistakes he made in Guru worship. That means in Christian worship. And so this, I believe, I didn't write this down, but I believe this is in the pastime of the Srila Prabhupada Leelamrita. I think it's a chapter called Jet Age Paribrajacharya. So I believe it's in that chapter, Hari Vilas Prabhu. So long story short, Hari Vilas Prabhu was the temple president of the Paris temple. And so one day, for whatever reason, Srila Prabhupada was giving a lecture in the Paris temple. And for whatever reason, Hari Vilas Prabhu and another young devotee named Ganesham Prabhu came in late for whatever reason. And so when they came in late, it's described that Ganesham Prabhu, who was a young devotee who was translating some of Prabhupada's books, presumably into French, he sat in the back. And Hari Vilas Prabhu, by his own admission, he says, I was proud to be the temple president, so I thought I should sit right next to Prabhupada in the front. So while Ganesham is sitting in the back, Hari Vilas Prabhu is going all the way up to the front to sit right next to Srila Prabhupada. And he said, at that moment, Srila Prabhupada gave me my first lesson. And what was the lesson? The lesson he gave me was, he didn't even acknowledge me. He didn't even look my way. So basically, it's described that one of the hosts of the Sunday feast or whatever, they says, Srila Prabhupada, this is Ganesham Prabhu in the back. He's translating some of your books. So Srila Prabhupada says, thank you very much. Very good. And so then it was like, oh yeah, Prabhupada, this is Hari Vilas Prabhu. He's our temple president. Hari Vilas was sitting right here. Srila Prabhupada was looking at the deity. So he says, at that moment, I understood what Srila Prabhupada was teaching me. So this is not, this is actually very humble, because the tendency is that we try to hide all my mistakes. So this is actually a very nice pastime, because the tendency we want to, with our spiritual masters, say we had all good experiences, but this is very humble. He's mentioning for our own benefit of what we should and shouldn't do. So what we shouldn't do? What we should do? Put other devotees before ourselves. What we shouldn't do? Don't put yourself before other devotees. And so this is a very nice lesson we could take in this time. So although he was physically close to the Guru in proximity, he was spiritually further away. So although Ganesham was physically further away from the Guru, he was closer in spiritual proximity. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada says always that the Vani, the instructions of the Guru, Trinada Pisuni Chena, are more important than the Vapu, the presence of the Guru. And so this is a lesson we could take in our own lives, is that a prima bhakta, we see in the scripture, they're not so oblivious to other devotees. They're not so involved in Guru worship or deity worship or God worship that they neglect other devotees, or even worse, disrespect them. Trinada Pisuni Chena. So this is a lesson we could take in our own life. And I guess I'll end right there. Maybe I could describe a few points when if we have any comments or questions. Otherwise, I'll explain a few more points. Since Subal is scaring me, Prabhu, he's standing right there. Sorry, Prabhu. That's a compliment. That keeps me regulated and on track. So we need devotees to keep us on track. Otherwise, the mind is just wander off everywhere. So, are there any comments or questions? Otherwise, I'll just explain a few more points and then we can end the class. We like 8:33. So we have at least 10 more minutes. No? Otherwise, I'll share a few more points. You have one? Do you have the mic, Prabhu? The microphone? Prabhu, Subaba, this is killing me. No, just kidding. do, 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 do.
The picture you're painting is one of, I guess, the dangers that a person is presented with in I guess, coming to devotional life and either perhaps neglecting other devotees or having an internal state of being envious. And this can manifest in different ways. Or perhaps not receiving the attention that they're hoping to receive. I mean, you highlighted different facets of this difficulty. Would you say that it's a matter of consistently chanting with care that can allow persons to become more conscious or more Krishna conscious? Or would you say that particular attention needs to be given to attending to the internal, perhaps enviousness of others or neglect of others? Or perhaps the sort of very self-centered approach, becoming conscious of that?
Sure. Thank you, Mataji. I'll just, it goes along with some of the other points that we're going to describe. So basically, you were describing, you know, when we have these bad qualities, is it because we need to be more attentive in our chanting, etc.? And so, yes, that's one thing, but Prahlad Maharaj, and there's so many verses that says Krishna consciousness begins with Shravanam, hearing. Shravanam Kirtana Vishnu, Smaranam Pada Sevanam, Archanam Vandanam, Dasyam Sakyam Amani Vedanam. So it begins with Shravana. And Shrimvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana, etc. There's so many verses. So this actually goes into the original point I was going to make, is that we don't see with our eyes, we see with our ears by hearing, Shravana. So it's very simple. Just like my mother, you know, she brought up to me something she's always told me over the years, that when she was a teenager, her father, my grandfather, was a handyman, so he always fit so many things, cars. One day he was fixing a vehicle, and he told my mother, you know, when she was a teenager, hand me the Allen wrench. Do you know what an Allen wrench is? Yes or no? Anybody? Huh? Do you know what an Allen wrench is? What does it look like? It's very simple to describe. What does it look like? Exactly. Beyond. So that's my whole point. So the Allen wrench is a wrench that they use to open and close the door. Now, you've done it before, Mataji, right? Open and close the door? Yes? No? As a pujari? So an Allen wrench is a wrench that's in the shape of an L. It's a very small wrench. So that's the whole point. Even if something appears right before your eyes, you cannot see it because you didn't see it with your ear, hearing, knowledge, shravana. Same thing. If, let's say, 20 people are in a room and somebody comes to you, and let's say a person in the room name is Sarah. Only one person among these 20 people. Somebody comes in the room and tells you, hey, Prabhu, can you give this note to Sarah? But you do not know who Sarah is. So even though she's in front of you, she's both in front of you and not in front of you. Why? Because we don't see with our eyes, we see with our ears through hearing. So therefore in the Gita, chapter 7, verse 25, I believe, what does Krishna say? He says, Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamai samavritaha mudayam nabhajinati lokamam ajam aviyayam. What does he say? Na aham. I am not prakash. Manifest sarvasya to everyone. I am not manifest to everyone. When we have demoniac qualities, so actually Prabhupada explains in that verse of the chapter 7, verse 25. He says, even though Krishna descended in this world, everyone saw him, but he was not manifest to everyone. What does that mean? That means the demons cannot see that Krishna was the supreme personality of Godhead. Why? Because they had demoniac qualities. On the other hand, the devotees, they could see Krishna as the supreme personality of Godhead. Why? Because they had divine qualities. So in the Gita chapter 16, it says we can have demoniac qualities or divine qualities. If we have demoniac qualities, then we cannot appreciate the greatness within anyone. And if we have divine qualities, then that means we can appreciate the greatness within everyone. So that's the difference. Seeing doesn't begin with your eyes. It begins with your hearing. Just like, there's so many examples. So what's the first thing a parent teaches her child? Does she say, my dear, let's say she has a 3-year-old child, my dear child, can you take out the garbage? Well, first she has to teach her child his ABCs, then he could identify what the hell is the garbage. So even though the garbage is manifest before him, he cannot see it. Why? Because he didn't see it with his ears, the knowledge. So that's the whole point in life. So this is actually in regards to, because, in Kali Yuga, what does it mean? It means the age of quarrel and hypocrisy, so much drama. And now from my personal experience, when the 2020 pandemic hit, at that point in my life, that was the least amount of devotional service I did in my life, because I wasn't even allowed in the temple. So of course I had to stick to my hearing, my chanting, but then it became miserable. I'm like, I can't go nowhere. And the devotees who previously invited me in their home, they were like, oh, Prabhu, no, you can't come for like at least 8 months probably before they, let up in the temple even longer, so finally, and so that was the least amount of devotional service I've done in my life. That was 2020. However, in 2021, this year, which is almost up, is actually the most devotional service I've ever done in my life. And it was like a complete 180, and especially the last 6 months, probably starting from Balaram Jayanti, just like I've basically started doing a kirtan every day with Amarama Prabhu. So that's enough. Then festival after festival, I was, helping without Jitendriya, Mother Rohini, especially with the flowers. And then, one of our pot washers left, so then I had to do pot washing. And obviously pot washing alone is like, zaps all of your energy. Then many other things along with having to maintain your sadhana, your hearing, your chanting. And by the end of 2021, I'm fried out. And not only that, even within the last couple of weeks, it's been so much drama. But anyway, I don't have time to explain that. I even had jokes prepared for that, but I'm running out of time, so I'll just stick to what Srila Prabhupada says in this regard. So the whole main point is that we could be honest with ourselves. How much are we hearing and chanting? And if we're not hearing and chanting, just like a baby, if the baby is not given knowledge, if he's not hearing the knowledge, then how can he communicate with others? In much the same way, if we're watching TV all day long, if we're watching social media all day long, if we're, doing so many nonsense things, wasting so many times voluntarily, if we have the opportunity to come to the temple and hear the Bhagavatam, if we're wasting, but then why do you think Krishna's not giving us those qualities? Because we're wasting time. So when people scream at us, people mistreat us, we may criticize them. Oh, you're mistreating. No, that's Krishna speaking through them. Stop wasting time. Stop wasting time. And so if we weren't wasting time for hearing and chanting, that means we won't be disturbed by all these, unnecessary things where it keeps the drama going. So that's our own choice. Krishna says he reciprocates according to how you approach him. So there's a nice quote. It says, life is like a trumpet. If you don't put anything into it, you won't get anything out of it. So be honest with yourself, how much will we put into our hearing and chanting? And if we're putting very little, then of course we have so many complaints. That means we can't communicate with others. Just like a child, if the child voluntarily skips school, he doesn't learn his ABCs, he doesn't learn his 1, 2, 3s. Yes, he could communicate with others verbally, but it's not full communication. He doesn't know reading and writing. In much the same way, if we do only a little devotional service, we cannot fully communicate with others. So maybe I'll end with this last point. So this is a nice point regarding communication. So in His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj book, The Journey Home, he describes that, of course, he met many yogis, swamis, and babas in India. So he says, I met one Baba named Kailash Baba. He describes that Kailash Baba, he taught me so many things. He taught me what to eat. When I was in India, he taught me what to eat, what not to eat, what plants were edible, what plants were poisonous, how to respect nature, how to respect the wild animals in nature. He says he taught me so many things. But at the end of this paragraph, he says, and we did not even speak the same language. We did not even speak. He spoke Hindi and I spoke English, but somehow or other he was able to convey so many profound messages to me. And so what's the lesson? The lesson I got from that is that even if people don't speak the same language, that doesn't mean they can't communicate. On the other hand, even if people do speak the same language, that doesn't mean they can communicate. If we're humble, appreciative, and forgiving, then we could communicate with others, even if we don't speak the same language. If we're proud, envious, and vengeful, that means we can't communicate with others, even if we do speak the same language. So it's not the language, but the love that allows us to communicate the good qualities. Yasyasi bhatir bhagavati akanchana sarva guniyas tatra samasay suraha. So I'll end with this quote. In the Holy Bible, it says, I think it's in 1 Corinthians, but it's a very famous verse, and the entire passage is very beautiful. But the first verse of it says, if I speak in the tongues of men or of angels, but do not have love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. So what does that mean? That means if we don't have love resulting from not hearing and chanting, that means all our speaking is like this: gong, gong, gong. And you wonder why there's miscommunication. So my understanding is that what Prabhupada says in this verse, in March 8, 1972 in Calcutta, Prabhupada says the temple is not meant for a business. It's meant for hearing and chanting. That's the first service any newcomer should come. Give them hearing and chanting. Encourage them to come to Srimad Bhagavatam. Otherwise, if you give them so many services, so much miscommunications. So thank you. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone, for coming. And I ended right on time, Subal Prabhu. You could turn the speaker on. Hare Krishna.